Douluo, Martial Soul Asura Sword, Supreme Killing God Chapter 11. Three Realms of Sword Tao, Practicing Sword Techniques. Hall of Worship. The moment Sumo stepped into the hall, an atmosphere of solemnity rushed towards him. At this moment, Qian Dailiu stood in the center of the hall, hands behind his back, his posture as straight as a pine. Behind him stood the other three worship elders, each possessing a profound aura. Their gazes fell upon Sumo, filled with scrutiny and appraisal. "Father, I have brought Xiaogang here," Qian Xunji said. Sumo remained calm, stepped forward and bowed. "Greetings to all the worship elders." On the way here, Qian Xunji had already explained the purpose of the visit and briefly introduced the identities of the worship elders. When Sumo learned that Qian Dailiu intended to personally teach him sword techniques, he felt somewhat surprised, yet also delighted. Qian Dailiu was not only one of the peak powerhouses on the continent, but his sword techniques were also second to none. If he could receive his guidance, his own sword skills would certainly improve rapidly. "No need for formalities," Qian Dailiu said with a faint smile. "Sumo, you are Jier's disciple, so there is no need to be formal in the future. You may simply address me as Grandpa Qian." Hearing this form of address, Sumo almost couldn't hold back his laughter. The dignified Supreme Pontiff of Spirit Hall was actually called by such a name. However, he kept a straight face and respectfully replied, "Yes, Grandpa Qian." "Release your spirit," Qian Dailiu said. Sumo nodded, raised his hand and held the Asura Demon Sword in his palm, while one yellow and one purple spirit ring appeared beneath his feet. Although the worship elders present had already heard the situation explained by Gold Crocodile Douluo, upon seeing the thousand-year second spirit ring with their own eyes, a trace of astonishment still flashed in their eyes. Qian Dailiu gazed at the sword in Sumo's hand, his eyes profound. He faintly sensed that the quality of this sword spirit seemed to be even higher than his own seraphim, and it was undoubtedly a god-level spirit. However, he was still somewhat worried that Sumo might not be able to resist temptation and walk the path of the fallen. Those fallen spirit masters, because of the characteristics of their spirits, could quickly increase their strength by absorbing life force or through other evil and crooked paths, thus failing to resist temptation and going astray. Qian Dailiu's expression suddenly became more serious. "Sumo, you must remember, power itself has no good or evil. The key lies in the person who uses it. A sword can be used for slaughter or it can be used for protection. Your path is destined to be full of temptations and trials. Do not be dominated by power, but rather dominate power." Sumo nodded earnestly, his gaze firm. Yes, this disciple will keep it in mind. Although his teacher was Qian Xunji, since Qian Dailiu was now going to teach him sword techniques, he naturally counted as half a teacher, so he referred to himself as a disciple. Qian Dailiu nodded slightly, a look of satisfaction flashing in his eyes. Sumo was only 6 years old, yet his eyes were clear and calm. Facing his gaze, he did not dodge nor show fear. Such temperament was truly rare. "Put away your spirit and follow me." Qian Dailiu turned and walked out of the hall. Sumo retracted his spirit and followed quickly. The two went upwards, passing through the hall of worship and winding along the stone steps in the mountains. Before long, the view suddenly opened up. This was a flat area in the mountains, surrounded by pine and cypress trees with clouds and mist swirling around. In the distance, undulating mountains appeared and disappeared as if in a fairyland. A huge blue stone lay horizontally by the cliff, its surface covered with crisscrossing sword marks, some deep and some shallow, dense and numerous. It was clearly used for sword practice by someone in the past. "Sit down," Qian Dailiu said. Sumo sat cross-legged as instructed, hands resting on his knees, his back straight. Qian Dailiu stood with his hands behind his back opposite him, his robes and golden hair fluttering gently in the breeze. "Today I will first tell you about the realms of Sword Tao." His voice was unhurried, yet clearly reached Sumo's ears. Sword Tao is divided into 3 realms: sword intent, sword domain, and man and sword as one. Sword intent. Where the intent goes, the sword follows. Everyone's temperament is different, their experiences are different, and the sword intent they comprehend is also different. Some people's sword intent is sharp like the wind, some is heavy like a mountain, some is blazing like fire. All are manifestations of one's inner heart. Sword domain is the sublimation after sword intent reaches its peak. Intent transforms from the formless into the tangible, using sword intent to cover a region, forming a domain. In sword as one is the ultimate realm of Sword Tao. The person is the sword and the sword is the person. Grass, trees, bamboo, and stones can all be used as swords. Xiaomo, everyone's Sword Tao is different. I can only share my insights with you and tell you about the path I have walked. As for what you can comprehend and how far you can go, it all depends on yourself. I can teach you the techniques of swordplay step by step, but the path of Sword Tao must ultimately be walked by yourself. Grandpa Qian. Sumo nodded earnestly. He already had a general idea in his heart. The Asura Demon Sword focuses on slaughter and was born for killing. His Sword Tao was destined to be related to slaughter. "Next, I will tell you about my cultivation insights." Qian Dailiu began to speak. His words were concise and refined, without a single word of nonsense, each sentence pointing directly to the core. Sumo listened intently, recording every word, while constantly digesting them in combination with his own understanding. For parts he couldn't fully comprehend for the moment, he didn't get impatient but firmly noted them down, waiting to slowly ponder them in the future. I don't know how long it had been, but Qian Dailiu's voice stopped abruptly. That is all for today. You should go back first and digest what you have learned today. Starting tomorrow, come here every morning to practice for 1 hour. Sumo stood up and bowed respectfully. Goodbye, Grandpa Qian. After saying this, he turned and walked down the mountain along the stone steps he had come from. Behind him, Qian Dailiu stood with his hands behind his back, watching Sumo's figure disappear, remaining motionless for a long time. The next morning, the sky gradually brightened. Sumo washed up simply, had breakfast, and went to the mountaintop alone. As soon as he stepped onto the flat area, Qian Dailiu's figure appeared quietly not far away. Grandpa Qian, Sumo greeted. Qian Dailiu nodded. Zio Mo, all sword techniques start from the basics. If the foundation is not solid, everything is a castle in the air. Moves are ever-changing. Only by practicing the basics to the extreme can the sword in your hand truly be as flexible as your own arm. He picked up a withered branch and held it in his hand. I will demonstrate it to you once first. Watch closely. As the words fell, Qian Dailiu moved. What he held was just a withered branch, but in his hands it seemed to transform into a peerless sword. Every one of his basic sword moves carried a sharp sword momentum. The branch cut through the air, emitting a sharp whistling sound. It was clearly a simple movement, yet in his hands it possessed the power to turn decay into magic. Sumo watched intently, his gaze tightly following every movement and every detail of force application by Qian Dailiu. As the last move was finished, Qian Dailiu stopped and stood, casually throwing the branch on the ground. You try it once. Sumo nodded and released the Asura Demon Sword spirit. He took a deep breath and began to imitate. Qian Dailiu stood with his hands behind his back, watching Sumo's dancing figure, a trace of satisfaction flashing in his eyes. Sumo had only watched it once. Although his movements were still a bit raw and stiff, every move was decent. His talent for sword Dao was indeed good. In the following time, Qian Dailiu began to correct Sumo's force application techniques and the essentials of the moves, correcting every one of his actions step by step. Where the force was used incorrectly, where the steps should be fast or slow, where the body should turn or tilt, everything was pointed out in place. An hour later, Sumo's back was soaked with sweat, and he had gradually mastered the essentials of those basic sword moves. To have such progress on the first day showed that Sumo's cultivation talent and sword Dao talent were both top tier. Alright, that is all for today. You go back, Qian Dailiu said. Sumo retracted his sword and bowed respectfully. Yes, goodbye, Grandpa Qian. After saying this, he turned and walked down the mountain. Chapter 12, Daily Study Plan, Practical Combat Training. After descending from the mountain, Sumo went back to wash up and change into clean clothes before heading to the Supreme Pontiff Palace with Bibi Dong. Greetings, teacher. The two bowed together to Qian Xunji. On the Supreme Pontiff throne, Qian Xunji wore a gentle smile and gestured for them to rise. Mo Donger, I have already formulated a study plan for you for the coming year. First of all, while cultivation is certainly important, theory is equally indispensable, so you will study theoretical knowledge every morning. However, having only theory and power without practical combat skills will not suffice. Therefore, the afternoons will be dedicated to physical training and sparring. Where spirit masters one rank higher than you will accompany you in practice matches. Those sparring partners were all people fiercely loyal to Spirit Hall. Sumo and Bibi Dong were still young and could not be exposed too early. At the very least, they had to wait until they had a certain level of self-preservation ability. Not for his busy administrative duties, Qian Xunji would have wanted to teach them personally. Qian Xunji paused for a moment and continued, you will inevitably get injured after training, and medicinal baths can not only strengthen your physique but also eliminate hidden injuries caused by training, so your evenings will be spent soaking in medicinal baths, followed by time for meditation and cultivation. This is the daily plan I have arranged for you. Yes, teacher, the two replied in unison. Books have already been prepared for you in the study behind the main hall. Go now, and if there is anything you do not understand, come and ask me at any time. The two replied together. Sumo and Bibi Dong arrived at the study where two desks were placed side by side with a large stack of books resting on them. Seeing the thickness of that stack of books, Bibi Dong's little face immediately fell. Ah, Sumo, so many books. When will I ever finish reading them? She pouted. Read slowly, a year is enough time, Sumo said, walking to the desk to sit down, picking up the top book and opening it. Bibi Dong had no choice but to sit down beside him. Sumo read very earnestly. The collection of books in the Supreme Pontiff Palace was far beyond comparison to the orphanage library. It recorded every aspect of the Douluo Continent, and the theories were much more systematic and in-depth. In contrast, Bibi Dong clearly had little interest in reading. After only 15 minutes, her eyelids began to droop. She held on for a while longer, but finally she couldn't take it anymore. Her head tilted and she fell asleep on the table. Sumo looked up and shook his head helplessly. It was no wonder she was so easily swayed by Xiaogang. If she had only seriously read the collections in Spirit Hall, she would have discovered that the so-called 10 core competencies were nothing more than patched together excerpts and summaries. Take for example the limit spirit ring theory, where every spirit ring was precise down to the year, as if thousands of experiments had been conducted. But where would Xiaogang, a level 29 spirit grandmaster, get this data? The answer was self-evident. Sumo withdrew his gaze and continued reading. He didn't know how much time had passed, but the morning session was drawing to a close. Sumo closed his book and turned to look beside him. Bibi Dong was still asleep, her little face resting on her arms, breathing evenly. "Wake up." He gently nudged her shoulder. Bibi Dong slowly woke up, lifting her head in a daze, rubbing her eyes, and then suddenly snapped to alertness. "Oh no, I fell asleep." She hurriedly looked at Sumo, shrinking her neck with a guilty conscience. How long did I sleep?" "Almost an hour, Bibi Dong." Just then, Sumo picked up a few sheets of paper from beside him and placed them in front of her. "These are some key points, memorize them." To prevent Bibi Dong from being swindled in the future, Sumo had really racked his brains. He had extracted the important knowledge points and organized them into concise and clear key points. Bibi Dong was stunned for a moment, then took the sheets of paper. The handwriting on them was neat and the organization was clear. Holding those papers, a strange feeling suddenly welled up in her heart. She opened her mouth, wanting to say something but didn't know what to say. She was a little embarrassed, her little face flushed slightly as she said, "Thank you, Sumo, I will definitely study hard from now on." Then she lowered her head and began to read intently. Afternoon, after physical training finished, it was time for practical combat sparring. In an open area, the surroundings had already been cleared. It was quiet and deserted. Sumo and Bibi Dong's training areas were far apart, so they would not interfere with each other. Sumo's opponent was a man around 30 years old, tall in stature with a steady gaze. Sumo stepped forward and raised his right hand. The Asura Demon Sword appeared from his palm and one yellow and one purple spirit ring slowly rose from beneath his feet. Sumo, level 25 attack system spirit grandmaster, spirit, Asura Demon Sword. Although the man had been informed of Sumo's information beforehand, when he saw that purple spirit ring with his own eyes, a flash of surprise still crossed the depths of his eyes. He quickly composed himself and also released his spirit. A long blade appeared in his hand. The blade was narrow and long with a heavy spine and an edge that gleamed with a chilling light. Beneath his feet, 3 spirit rings of the best configuration slowly rose. July, level 35 attack system spirit elder, spirit, windslaying blade. Let's begin. Sumo gripped the hilt of the sword, a flash of fighting spirit crossing his eyes. Having come to this world for so long, he had never truly fought anyone. Today was the perfect time to test his own strength. As soon as Julai's voice fell, the first spirit ring beneath his feet suddenly lit up. First spirit skill, Gale Step. His figure instantly turned into an afterimage, his speed soaring as he swept toward Sumo like a gale. He did not charge straight ahead but rather drifted left and right, his trajectory difficult to predict. Sumo's pupils constricted slightly. So fast and the movement was erratic, making it hard to predict. Sumo did not hesitate. The first spirit ring beneath his feet suddenly lit up. First spirit skill, Asura Blood Fiend. A faint layer of blood-colored light instantly enveloped Sumo's body and the Asura Demon Sword. The attack power of the Asura Demon Sword and his own speed were instantly doubled. Just at this moment, Julai had reached close quarters and slashed down with his blade. Sumo's footwork shifted rapidly and he dodged to the side. Julai's windslaying blade brushed past his lapel, bringing with it a fierce gust of wind. Missing with the strike, a flash of surprise crossed Julai's eyes, but he did not pause in the slightest. His footwork changed, he twisted his body to rotate and the windslaying blade swept back horizontally. Sumo quickly blocked with the Asura Demon Sword in front of him. The moment the blade and sword met, he only felt a massive force come from his hands, his feet sank and he slid backward several steps. Julai's pupils constricted. He had used 50% of his strength in that strike, combined with the impact of Gale Step. A typical spirit grandmaster would not be able to take it at all. He hadn't expected Sumo to be able to block it. He didn't think any further. He stepped hard beneath his feet, leaped backward and opened distance from Sumo, taking my second spirit skill. Julai's second spirit ring lit up. Second spirit skill, Wind Blade Continuous Slash. Julai gripped the blade with both hands and slashed through the air. 3 cyan blade beams shot out from the windslaying blade, flying toward Sumo in a triangular formation, fast as lightning, sealing off the space for him to dodge left or right. Sumo's eyes narrowed. He did not have Ghost Shadow perplexing track like Tang San, nor did he have a teleportation spirit ability. This move was extremely fast and had a wide range. With his current strength he could not dodge and had to take it head-on. Chapter 13. Sumo reaches his limit post-battle review. Second spirit skill, Asura Blood Armor. A red light flashed around Sumo, and a thin layer of blood-colored energy armor instantly covered his body. He felt a warm current surging wildly through his limbs and bones. He could clearly feel that his defense and strength had increased significantly at this moment. However, at that very moment, the cyan blade aura was already upon him. Sumo had no way out. And he did not intend to retreat. He gripped the Asura Demon Sword in his hand and met the cyan blade aura head-on. Boom! The two forces collided with a roar, and violent shockwaves exploded in all directions from the point of impact. Sumo felt a tremendous force travel through the Asura Demon Sword and throughout his entire body, forcing him to take 5 involuntary steps back before he could barely steady himself. The stalemate lasted only a moment. Under the sharpness of the Asura Demon Sword, the cyan blade aura trembled violently before finally turning into specks of cyan light and completely shattering and dissipating. Sumo panted slightly, feeling his internal energy in turmoil, and his right arm, which held the sword, had become somewhat numb. If not for the power and defense boost from the Asura blood armor, he would undoubtedly have been injured by this strike. However, Zhu Lai did not give him a chance to catch his breath at all. First spirit skill, Gale Step. An afterimage still remained where Zhu Lai had been standing, but in the blink of an eye, the wind-slashing blade appeared within 3 feet of Sumo, too fast. Sumo didn't even have time to adjust his breathing and could only rely on instinct to hastily raise his sword to block. Clang, sword and blade clashed, emitting a metallic ringing sound. Clang, clang, clang. Zhou Lai did not give Sumo any chance to breathe, delivering one strike after another in an endless stream. His swordsmanship was exquisite, and every strike was heavy and powerful. Sumo could only barely hold on by relying on the amplification of his 2 spirit abilities and the basic sword techniques he had just learned in the morning. For a time, the 2 figures, one large and one small, flashed across the field, with blades and swords constantly crossing and the sounds of their collision echoing endlessly. But soon, Sumo realized that although Zhu Lai's blade appeared fierce, he always held back a bit of force at the most critical moments. He could clearly have forced him into a desperate situation with a single strike, yet he deliberately left openings for him to catch his breath. He could have ended the battle, yet he stubbornly dragged the fight into a stalemate. Clearly, Zhu Lai was feeding him moves, allowing him to rapidly accumulate experience during the battle. Consequently, Sumo's heart slowly calmed down, and he began to feel the changes in the rhythm of Zhu Lai's blade momentum. Gradually, he went from purely passive defense to being able to occasionally strike back with a sword move, after dozens of rounds. Bad, a trace of approval flashed in Zhu Lai's eyes, but let's stop here for today. He could see that Sumo's spirit power was about to be exhausted. He struck the Asura Demon Sword hard with his blade, knocking Sumo back 3 steps, and at the same time his 3rd spirit ring suddenly lit up. 3rd spirit skill, Heavy Blade Enhancement. In an instant, the weight of the blade and his own strength increased by 50%. He slashed down with one strike. Sumo felt an irresistible force coming from the sword. It felt like being hit head-on by a small hill. He instantly lost his balance, his body flew backward, and he fell heavily to the ground 3 zhang away. Sumo climbed up from the ground, propped himself up with his sword, knelt on one knee and gasped for air. At this moment, his face was as pale as paper, and his chest heaved violently. The light of the Asura blood armor on his body was dim, as if it would dissipate at any moment. Although Sumo's spirit was powerful, he was only 6 years old. His strength could not compare to the prime-aged Zhu Lai, and the difference in combat experience was worlds apart. His combat experience was almost 0. The sudden increase in Zhu Lai's force caught him off guard, which was why he was knocked flying by a single strike. Across from him, Zhu Lai's breathing was also somewhat rapid, with fine beads of sweat seeping from his forehead. His spirit power had also been more than half consumed. The look in his eyes as he gazed at Sumo was full of approval. For Sumo's first real combat facing him, a level 35 spirit elder, to achieve this level was far beyond his expectations. Your Highness, thank you for the match. Zhu Lai retracted his spirit and bowed to Sumo with cupped fists. Sumo nodded without saying much. He had reached his limit. Both of his spirit abilities were for amplification. He had no offensive means and could only rely on amplification to hold on. Perhaps only when his swordsmanship became more refined could he truly fight against an opponent like Zhu Lai. Junior brother, at this moment, Bibi Dong's figure came running from not far away. Her battle had ended long ago. Facing a control system spirit grandmaster, even though her first spirit ability could double her speed, the gap in spirit power was simply too large, and coupled with her lack of combat experience, she hadn't even gotten close to her opponent before her spirit power was completely exhausted. She had been resting on the sidelines for a long time, watching Sumo's battle the whole time. Seeing that he had finally finished the battle, she hurriedly ran over and grabbed his arm to support him. Are you okay? Bibi Dong asked, her face full of worry. Sumo retracted his spirit and managed a smile at her. I'm fine, it's just that the consumption was too great. Then let's hurry back and rest. Okay, Bibi Dong supported him and they walked back slowly, step by step. When they returned to the sleeping quarters, the maids had already prepared a medicinal bath. The medicinal bath prepared by Qian Xunji used precious medicinal herbs. The thick, fragrant scent of medicine permeated the swirling steam, and just smelling it was enough to refresh one's spirit. Sumo soaked his whole body in the tub, the warm water wrapping around his exhausted body, and the soreness all over him gradually eased under the infiltration of the medicinal power. He closed his eyes, but in his mind he was replaying every detail of today's battle over and over again. Zhou Lai's first spirit ability was agile and elusive, suitable for surprise attacks and kiting. The second spirit ability was a long-range area attack. The third spirit ability, Heavy Blade Enhancement, was an amplification-type spirit ability that could instantly increase strength and the weight of the blade. And as for himself, both of his spirit abilities were for amplification. He had no offensive means and his swordsmanship was too rusty. The basic sword forms he had just learned in the morning could not possibly become muscle memory by the afternoon, so he could only rigidly copy and use them. But Sumo was not discouraged in the slightest, because he knew very well that these were all things that could be practiced. Sword techniques could be practiced until proficient, experience could be accumulated, and reactions could be improved. If he couldn't block it today, then he would tomorrow. If he couldn't win tomorrow, then he would the day after. One day he would win. After the medicinal bath ended, he changed into clean clothes, sat cross-legged on the bed, and entered meditation. Sumo discovered that after a day of high-intensity training, coupled with the nourishment of the medicinal bath, the circulation of his spirit power had become much smoother. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before he could break through to level 26. Time passed in a hurry, and in the blink of an eye, a year had passed. During this year, Sumo's life was extremely regular. Every day, at the first light of dawn, he would get up and head to the mountaintop to practice sword techniques under the guidance of Qian Xunji. Spring turned to autumn, winter turned to summer. For a full year, he never wavered regardless of the weather. His sword techniques had gone from rusty to proficient, from stiff to fluid, and had finally reached Qian Xunji's requirements. Chapter 14. 1 Year of Growth. Immortal Herb Catalog. After returning from sword practice, Sumo returned to the study behind the Supreme Pontiff Palace to study theoretical knowledge with Bibi Dong. Qian Xunji was busy with church affairs and rarely supervised them personally, only arranging the study material every day. Sumo was happy to be free. He carefully read the classics every day, and thanks to his photographic memory, the knowledge accumulated in his mind grew more and more. Bibi Dong no longer loved sleeping as much as before. With Sumo's urging and company, her progress this past year had also been remarkable. Whenever she read books, she would sit next to Sumo, watching quietly, and when she encountered something she didn't understand, she would tilt her head to ask him. In the afternoon, one could always see two small figures drenched in sweat, engaging in physical training. The traditional physical training of the Douluo Continent was primitive and ordinary. Although the methods of the Spirit Hall were better than Xiaogang's running with stones on his back, they weren't much better. Therefore, combining memories from his previous life, Sumo improved many training equipment and methods. Added to this, they would occasionally consume higher-year whale glue, continuously improving their physical fitness, far surpassing spirit masters of the same level. When it came to actual combat training, from their initial failures, they could now go back and forth with experienced spirit masters, and the progress was visible to the naked eye. It is worth mentioning that half a year ago, relying on his increasingly proficient swordsmanship, Sumo truly defeated a full-effort Zhou Lai for the first time. At that time, his spirit power had reached level 28, while Zhou Lai was still at level 35. Sumo's amplification spirit abilities would improve as his strength increased. With both spirit abilities activated, his overall strength was comparable to high-level Spirit Elder. However, when the battle ended, Sumo's spirit power was almost exhausted, but his sword pointed directly at Zhou Lai's chest, the tip stopping 3 inches from his lapel. He had won. At that moment, Zhou Lai froze in place, looking down at the sword tip resting before his chest, his eyes full of shock and admiration. Afterward, Qian Xunji arranged even stronger opponents and Sumo slowly defeated them one by one. The strongest one had reached level 39 spirit power, only a step away from becoming a spirit ancestor. He also fell under Sumo's sword. Over the year, Sumo's spirit power broke through from the peak of level 25 all the way to level 30. With just one spirit ring, he could become a true spirit elder. A 7-year-old spirit elder had broken all records in the history of the Douluo Continent. Even the Qian family's seraphim spirit, with innately full spirit power, had no one who could break through to spirit elder at 7 years old. Bibi Dong saw all of Sumo's progress and was anxious in her heart. She was Sumo's senior sister after all. Although they were the same age, she was accepted as a disciple by Qian Xunji first, so she was naturally the senior sister. Even if Sumo's innate spirit power was a full 10 levels higher than hers, giving him a huge head start, she was still a genius with twin spirits and innately full spirit power, so how could she be left so far behind? Thus, with this unyielding spirit, she was exceptionally hard-working and serious in her cultivation, afraid of neither hardship nor fatigue. In 1 year, relying on the resources of the Spirit Hall, her spirit power also made astonishing progress. Rising from level 12 all the way to level 17, this speed was already very astonishing. But Bibi Dong was still not satisfied. She harbored a drive in her heart. She vowed to catch up to Sumo's footsteps, or at least not let him leave her too far behind. Just like that, the one-year systematic study arranged by Qian Xunji officially ended. Next, they could study and cultivate freely. If they didn't understand anything or needed anything, they could go find Qian Xunji at any time. In the afternoon, the scorching sun hung in the sky. Outside a luxurious manor in the center of Spirit City, Sumo stood alone at the entrance. Before long, a figure came hurriedly to the door after being announced by a servant. The person was a man with a feminine appearance, his gait resembling that of a woman. He was the future elder of the Spirit Hall, Bibi Dong's right-hand man, Chrysanthemum Douluo Guan. Of course, he was currently just a cardinal, far from having stepped into the realm of a titled Douluo. When Yu Guan saw the golden token in Sumo's hand, a look of shock flashed in his eyes instantly. A 6 or 7-year-old child was actually holding a Pope's edict. One must know that the Pope's edict was equivalent to the Pope himself. Seeing the token was like seeing the person. Who was this child? Could he be the Pope's illegitimate son? But he didn't look like it. Sumo's true identity was currently known only to the high-ranking members of the Spirit Hall. Qian Xunji intended to wait a while longer, until Sumo and Bibi Dong's strength improved a bit more, before officially announcing their identities and establishing them as the Holy Son and Holy Maiden. However, before that, Qian Xunji gave him and Bibi Dong each a Pope's edict to facilitate their actions and avoid some unnecessary trouble. Yue Guan dared not be negligent, quickening his pace to hurry before Sumo, bowing respectfully. Yue Guan greets you, my lord. Please come in. Sumo nodded, put the Pope's edict back into his spirit tool and followed Yu Guan into the hall. Under Yu Guan's respectful attitude, he did not decline and naturally sat in the main seat. Wonder what business you have with me today, my lord? Yu Guan stood to the side and asked curiously. He secretly speculated in his heart. Coming to his door in person with a Pope's edict, could it be a major event? Sumo said indifferently, Cardinal Yu Guan, it's not a major event. I am someone who loves reading and studying, and recently I wanted to research knowledge regarding rare herbs and plants. I heard that you have always loved flowers and plants, and I wanted to ask if you have any catalogs of rare herbs and plants here. I would like to borrow one for a period of time. His purpose for this trip was that catalog of flowers and plants that recorded the immortal herb. In the entire Douluo Continent, besides the future Tang San, only Yu Guan and the Breaking Clan knew about the immortal herb. Sumo needed to find a time to acquire the immortal herb. That place should still be ownerless land, and as one of the greatest opportunities on the Douluo Continent, it should naturally be taken into his possession as soon as possible. He didn't recognize the immortal herb, so he could only ask Yu Guan. Hearing this, Yu Guan breathed a sigh of relief. He thought something major had happened, that he had come with a Pope's edict to find him. It turned out he just wanted to read a book. Speaking of flowers and plants, Yu Guan immediately became interested, his eyes brightening a bit. My lord, you have come to the right person. He took a thick book from his spirit tool. It was the ancestral record of rare herbs and plants passed down in the Yu Guan family, containing illustrations and introductions to countless rare flowers and plants. My lord, here. Yu Guan respectfully handed the flower and plant catalog to Sumo with both hands. Sumo took it, flipped through 2 pages and nodded. Thanks. He didn't say much more, but he noted this favor. Yue Guan's talent was actually quite good. There was a mystic velvet heaven-reaching chrysanthemum in the ice and fire yin-yang well, and in the entire Douluo Continent, no one was more suitable for it than Yu Guan. If he gave it to him when the time came, not only would it allow him to achieve greater heights, but it would also earn his unwavering loyalty. He never doubted Yu Guan's loyalty to the Spirit Hall. He knew that both Yu Guan and Gui Mei were loyal people and trustworthy. You're too polite, my lord, Yu Guan said quickly. I will leave first. When I finish reading it, I will return it to you. Sumo stood up and left. Go slowly, my lord. Yu Guan respectfully watched his departing back, stopping only after sending him to the door. Not until Sumo's figure disappeared did Yu Guan withdraw his gaze and mutter to himself. I wonder who that child really is. Sumo didn't say, and he dared not ask more. Chapter 15. Detailed explanation of immortal herbs. Junior brother, you're the best. After Sumo returned to his room, he took out that thick illustrated compendium of flowers and plants, sat down by the desk and began to read through it seriously. The compendium was extremely well preserved, each page as smooth as new, clearly having been meticulously cared for by Yu Guan. It depicted patterns of various rare treasures and exotic herbs, with delicate lines that were lifelike. Below were dense small characters, names, growth habits, harvesting and storage methods. Every detail was recorded with extreme precision. Sumo read very seriously, not missing a single rare treasure or exotic herb. Although most were not immortal-grade medicinal herbs, many materials were of great benefit to a spirit master's cultivation. When he flipped to a certain page, Sumo's movement suddenly slowed down. 8-petal immortal orchid. He softly read the name on the illustration. The illustration showed a translucent white orchid with 8 petals stretching out. The annotations below were dense. Sumo read this page especially carefully. He knew that the harvesting and storage of each immortal herb had strict requirements. A slight oversight would greatly diminish its medicinal effects, or even cause them to vanish completely. Each immortal herb also had its own method of consumption. If done improperly, it could even cause irreparable harm. Since he had obtained this compendium, he intended to firmly memorize the characteristics of every immortal herb. Only after memorizing everything did he continue flipping pages. Next, one familiar name after another entered his sight: mystic velvet heaven-reaching chrysanthemum, Kiluo tulip, coxcomb phoenix sunflower. Every single one was an immortal herb mentioned in the original work, and every single one was enough to drive the spirit master's world into a frenzy. Of course, the immortal grade medicinal herbs recorded in the book were far more than these. There were many others that had never been mentioned. Sumo read more and more carefully, his gaze drifting back and forth between the patterns and the text, completely unaware of the passage of time. Night fell. Sumo's door was pushed open, and a figure nimbly slipped inside and closed the door again, the movement so practiced it was as if they had been done countless times. Hearing the movement, Sumo looked up. The person was none other than Bibi Dong. His expression was very calm, as if he had long expected this. Over the past year, Bibi Dong had indeed come here frequently and stayed the night. The first time she came, she said she had a nightmare about her family being killed by fallen spirit masters. That night, Sumo comforted her for a long time and stayed with her until she fell into a deep sleep. From then on, Bibi Dong frequently ran to his room, and it gradually became a regular occurrence. Sometimes when Sumo was already asleep, she would quietly sneak over, gently lift the quilt, and burrow into the bed, curling up beside him like a kitten. At this moment, Bibi Dong walked to Sumo's side, naturally leaned in, and curiously peeked at the book in his hand. "Junior brother, what are you reading?" An illustrated guide to flowers and plants borrowed from Bishop Yu Guan. It records many rare treasures and exotic herbs. Sumo moved to the side to make room for her. Rare treasures and exotic herbs. Bibi Dong sat down next to him, tilting her head to look at the patterns, her eyes filled with a bit of novelty. "What's so interesting about this? These aren't ordinary plants." Sumo shook his head slightly. He flipped through a few pages of the compendium and pointed at the pattern on one. "Look at this one. It's called the Yearning Heartbroken Red, an immortal grade medicinal herb, the king of all flowers. After taking it, one can significantly increase their spirit power and even improve their cultivation talent, and there are no side effects." Bibi Dong's mouth opened slightly, her eyes full of shock. "It can increase spirit power without side effects, and even improve talent. How could such a thing exist?" A year had passed, and she was no longer the ignorant little girl she once was. She knew very well that methods to increase spirit power did exist in this world, but most required a price, either overdrawing potential or damaging one's foundation. Something like what Sumo described, an immortal herb that could improve talent without side effects, was unheard of to her. It should be real. This is an heirloom of Bishop Yu Guan. Sumo didn't say much more and changed the subject. "By the way, there's a story about this immortal herb. Do you want to hear it?" Bibi Dong nodded hurriedly. "I do," Sumo said gently. "Legend has it that a long time ago there was a young man who was obsessed with flowers. His sincerity moved a flower fairy from the god realm. The flower fairy secretly descended to the mortal realm to marry him, but was discovered by the heavenly gods. Immortals and mortals followed different paths, and the heavenly gods, in their wrath, summoned the flower fairy back to the god realm. The young man, having lost his love, was depressed all day and no longer had the heart to care for his flowers, until one day a white-haired old man told him that the white peony in the garden was the incarnation of his lover. If he destroyed it, the flower fairy would become immortal and return to the mortal world. But how could the young man bear to hurt it? He could only drink and weep before it every day, eventually dying of a broken heart from yearning. Before he died, a mouthful of blood splattered onto the petals. Sumo pointed to the several blood-red spots on the petals in the illustration. "Look, these blood-red patches are the young man's heart's blood. Heavenly gods are so mean, actually tearing them apart." Bibi Dong's eyes grew red, her voice carrying a hint of a sob. "On the Douluo Continent, whether physically or mentally, spirit masters naturally develop faster." Although she was young now, she was not ignorant of the feelings between men and women. This story happened to touch a soft chord in her heart. "All right," Sumo rubbed her head, his movements gentle. "It's just a legend." "Junior brother, you're so annoying, telling such a tragic story late at night." Bibi Dong pouted and gave him a reproachful look. Sumo smiled. "Let's look at the others." Continued flipping through the compendium, showing her other immortal herbs, introducing their names and characteristics one by one. Bibi Dong was gradually attracted by those novel things. A moment later, "Junior brother, these immortal herbs are all so amazing." Bibi Dong grabbed his arm. "If you find any immortal herbs in the future and have extras, don't forget your senior sister." "Don't worry, I could forget anyone, but I could never forget you." "Hee hee, junior brother, I knew you were the best." Bibi Dong's eyes curved into crescents. The night deepened. After an unknown amount of time, Bibi Dong, who had been reading with Sumo, suddenly yawned. Sumo's movements paused and he turned his head to look at her. "Sleepy?" Sumo asked. Bibi Dong rubbed her eyes and nodded. "Then let's rest for today, we'll look at it more later." Sumo closed the illustrated compendium and put it into his spirit tool. Sumo turned off the light and the two lay down on the bed. Bibi Dong naturally rolled over, hugged his arm, found a comfortable position and closed her eyes. Before long, the sound of steady breathing softly echoed. Although Sumo's eyes were closed, his mind was still reflecting on the immortal herbs recorded in the compendium. He silently calculated when it would be appropriate to go and get those immortal herbs. He was still young, and Qian Xunji probably wouldn't let him leave Spirit City. Forget it, why think so much? It's still quite early for Douluo to discover the ice and fire yin-yang well. It's still unclaimed land, so there's no rush for the time being. With that thought, he stopped thinking further and gradually drifted into a dreamland. Chapter 16, Black Gold Sword Feather Eagle, absorbing the third spirit ring the afternoon of the next day, deep within the mixed zone of the Stardew Great Forest. The air was humid and sultry, with the occasional roar of a spirit beast drifting in from afar. Sumo walked slowly alongside Gold Crocodile Douluo. This trip deep into the Stardew Great Forest was to hunt for Sumo's third spirit ring. Originally, Qian Xunji was supposed to bring Sumo, but since he was only a low-level titled Douluo, Qian Dailiu was not at ease, and had the 98-level Gold Crocodile Douluo take charge once again. As they walked, Gold Crocodile Douluo suddenly stopped. He raised his head and looked toward the sky. Sumo followed his gaze but saw nothing. With his current strength, his range of perception naturally could not compare to Gold Crocodile Douluo's. Before long, a sharp cry suddenly rang out from high above. Immediately after, a giant bird broke through the clouds. Sumo narrowed his eyes, gradually making out the appearance of the giant bird. It was a giant eagle nearly 5 meters long with a wingspan of over 10 meters. Its entire body was covered in black gold feathers that shimmered with a cold, hard metallic luster under the sunlight, each one appearing as if forged from refined iron. Most striking were the feathers at the edges of its wings. They stood erect like swords, their edges gleaming with a chilling light as if a single gentle swipe could tear an enemy apart. Black Gold Sword Feather Eagle. Gold Crocodile Douluo narrowed his eyes slightly. A flying-type spirit beast, skilled in aerial surprise attacks. Its sword feathers can detach to attack, and its speed is extremely fast. It is a spirit beast well suited for you. He paused, his gaze lingering on the giant eagle for a moment before his brows furrowed slightly. However, this one already has 5,000 years of cultivation, which is the limit for an ordinary spirit master's fourth spirit ring. Ziomo, for the sake of caution, should we look for another? Gold Crocodile Douluo turned his head to look at Sumo, asking with concern. Sumo did not answer immediately. He stood quietly in place, looking up at the black gold sword feather eagle circling in the sky. According to the limits of the Spirit Master's world in the Douluo Continent, the age of a third spirit ring should be around 1,700 years. 5,000 years was nearly 3 times that limit. If an ordinary spirit master were to rashly absorb it, it would be courting death. But he had a strong intuition that he could absorb it. Moreover, over the past year he had consumed quite a bit of high-age whale glue, and combined with daily uninterrupted physical training and medicinal baths, his physical constitution had long since far surpassed that of spirit masters at the same level. Most importantly, he trusted his intuition. Grandpa Gold Crocodile. Sumo withdrew his gaze and said firmly, "Believe in me, I can absorb its spirit ring." Gold Crocodile Douluo was silent for a moment. The circumstances of Sumo's previous 2 spirit ring absorptions were still fresh in his memory. Perhaps this time it would really work as well. "Are you sure?" he asked one more time. "Yes," Sumo nodded, his gaze steadfast. "Well, then I will follow your lead." The moment his words fell, the aura around Gold Crocodile Douluo changed abruptly. His golden crocodile king spirit was released suddenly, and 9 spirit rings lit up one by one from beneath his feet. 2 yellow, 2 purple, 4 black, and 1 red. The final 100,000-year spirit ring was as bright red as blood, radiating a suffocating sense of oppression. The next moment, Gold Crocodile Douluo soared into the air. He transformed into a streak of golden light, rushing straight toward the black gold sword feather eagle high in the sky at a speed almost impossible for the naked eye to track. Sumo stood below, looking up at the golden light that had pierced through the sky, his eyes flickering slightly. It was a pity he did not have the ability to fly. Otherwise, he truly would have wanted to handle this battle himself. High in the sky, the black gold sword feather eagle had originally been searching for its prey for the day. Suddenly, an extremely terrifying aura surged up from below. The strength of that aura made its hair stand on end instantly. It abruptly lowered its head and saw a streak of golden light approaching it at a terrifying speed. What terrified it the most was the blood-red spirit ring circling the figure. The black gold sword feather eagle flapped its wings violently, turning around to flee. However, in the face of absolute power, any struggle was futile. Gold Crocodile Douluo did not even use any spirit ability. He simply rushed above the black gold sword feather eagle, then raised a foot and stomped down fiercely. The black gold sword feather eagle let out an extremely shrill scream, its body plummeting straight toward the ground like a meteorite. Bang! A loud bang reverberated through the Stardew Great Forest as the black gold sword feather eagle smashed heavily into the ground. Its body lay in the pit, twitching slightly. Its originally sharp and fierce pupils now held only terror and despair, and fresh blood continuously seeped from the corners of its beak. With just a single blow, the black gold sword feather eagle was already on the verge of death. Gold Crocodile Douluo landed back beside Sumo, his expression as calm as usual, as if he had just casually swatted away a flying insect. "Go ahead, Xiaomo," he said indifferently. "Thank you, Grandpa Gold Crocodile." Sumo stepped toward the black gold sword feather eagle, released his Asura Demon Sword spirit and cleanly pierced its vital point. The moment the blade pierced through flesh and blood, the black gold sword feather eagle's body shuddered violently, then completely lost all signs of life. A blood mist overflowed. The Asura Demon Sword lit up with a faint glow once again, absorbing the blood energy. Sumo could feel a warm power surging from the sword into his body. This power was even stronger than the previous 2 times. A moment later, a deep purple spirit ring slowly rose from the corpse of the black gold sword feather eagle. Sumo sat cross-legged on the edge of the giant pit. He closed his eyes and guided the spirit ring toward himself. The moment the spirit ring touched his body, violent energy surged crazily into his limbs and bones. That energy was fierce and overbearing, rampaging through his body as if it wanted to tear his meridians apart. Pain. It was too painful. Sumo gritted his teeth, his body trembling violently, veins bulging on his forehead. Just then, a strange change occurred. Sumo suddenly felt a warm current rise within him, flowing slowly through his body. The rampaging, violent energy actually gradually calmed down, and the tearing pain instantly diminished by more than half. His trembling body gradually stabilized, and his tightly furrowed brows also relaxed slightly. Gold Crocodile Douluo kept watch by his side, his gaze fixed tightly on Sumo just a moment ago. When Sumo was trembling violently, his hand had already been raised, his spirit power ready to unleash, prepared to intervene and interrupt at any moment. Fortunately, it wasn't long before Sumo stabilized. Gold Crocodile Douluo slowly lowered his hand and let out a long sigh of relief, but a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. Just now, it was clearly a precursor to losing control, yet in the blink of an eye that violent aura had calmed down. However, he could not see the reason for it. Gold Crocodile Douluo narrowed his eyes slightly and focused his senses for a moment, but he detected nothing. He shook his head and stopped overthinking it. As long as Sumo was unharmed, that was enough. As for the rest, Sumo already possessed a touch of mystery, and perhaps this was simply what made him extraordinary. Time passed minute by minute. The process of absorbing the spirit ring was gradually nearing its end. However, just as it was about to end, a sudden change occurred. Sumo only felt a tearing, excruciating pain coming from his back. That kind of pain was completely different from the impact when the spirit ring had entered his body earlier. It was a tearing sensation that seemed to seep from his very bones, as if something was slowly stretching his skin and flesh, about to break out from within his body. Chapter 17, External Spirit Bone Shura Sword Prison. Sumo's face turned pale and bean-sized beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. He let out a low groan of pain, his brows furrowed tightly and his body began to tremble violently. At this moment, although he was trembling all over from the pain, he neither fainted nor lost control. He simply gritted his teeth and endured the excruciating pain. Gold Crocodile Douluo, who was on the side, saw this and instead of taking action, revealed a hint of surprise. Because Sumo's current state was not that of losing control while absorbing a spirit ring, Gold Crocodile Douluo vaguely guessed something. Sumo had very likely obtained a heaven-sent opportunity, which was an external spirit bone. An external spirit bone is a special existence outside of the 6 main spirit bones. Its probability of appearing is extremely low, less than 1 in 10,000. Every external spirit bone possesses growth potential and can continuously evolve as the spirit master's cultivation increases. In terms of value, it is absolutely no less than a 100,000-year spirit bone. As a titled Douluo who has lived for over 100 years, although Gold Crocodile Douluo had never absorbed an external spirit bone, Spirit Hall's records were vast and numerous, and naturally included records of external spirit bones, so he was naturally aware of them. Sumo's current state matched the records very well. Gold Crocodile Douluo took a deep breath, suppressed the shock in his heart, and kept his gaze locked tightly on Sumo to prevent any accidents. A moment later, Sumo suddenly opened his eyes. At that instant, a crisp sound came from behind him. With a ripping sound, the clothing on his back was instantly torn, and from the position of his shoulder blades, a pair of black gold wings suddenly unfolded. The wings spanned more than 3 meters, and every feather looked like a sharp sword gleaming with a cold, piercing light. The sword wings flapped violently, whoosh. The fallen leaves on the ground were swept up and scattered in all directions. Sumo's body suddenly soared into the air from the ground. As it was his first time flying, he naturally could not control it well. The sword wings flapped wildly behind him, carrying his body swaying left and right in the air like a child just learning to walk. He tried to control his direction, but his body suddenly tilted to the left, nearly crashing into a giant tree. He hurriedly adjusted, but then pitched to the right, crashing into the tree canopy, causing countless branches and leaves to fall with a rustle. Sumo hurriedly adjusted, flapping about clumsily in the air for a good while until he was finally able to fly steadily. he hovered in midair looking down at the ground below. This overlooking perspective and the feeling of soaring freely made a surge of indescribable joy well up in his heart. Just a short while ago, he had been watching gold crocodile Douluo's back as he soared through the air, secretly lamenting that he did not have the ability to fly. As it turned out, in such a short time he already possessed an external spirit bone capable of flight. A moment later, Sumo slowly landed back on the ground, the wings gently folding behind his back, his face full of joy. Haha Xiaomo, congratulations, I didn't expect you to actually obtain an external spirit bone. Good. Very good, gold crocodile Douluo strode forward, his laughter echoing through the forest, and reached out to pat Sumo on the shoulder. He looked up and down at the sword wings behind Sumo, his eyes full of wonder. Right. Gold crocodile Douluo suddenly remembered something and asked, besides flight, what other abilities do these wings have? Sumo smiled slightly. I call this external spirit bone the black gold sword wings. It can increase all my stats by 100%, allowing me to unleash greater power in battle and possess higher flexibility. As for other abilities, please watch Grandpa Gold Crocodile. As his voice fell, the black gold sword wings behind him flapped violently. Whoosh! His figure suddenly shot up from the ground, his speed astonishingly fast. 20 meters away stood a giant tree, as thick as a person could embrace, with a straight trunk and a canopy that blotted out the sky. Sumo's figure instantly appeared beside the giant tree, his body turning sharply. The black gold sword wings swept across the trunk of the giant tree. A black light flashed. The next second, Sumo's figure had already returned to the ground with his back to the giant tree. Just then, the giant tree behind him slowly tilted, and immediately, with a loud boom, it crashed heavily onto the ground. From this, one could see how sharp these sword wings were. Just then, a series of fine clicking sounds came from the wings behind Sumohe, saw the black gold sword wings behind him changing. Those originally tightly arranged feathers were actually detaching from the wings one by one, hovering behind Sumohe in the blink of an eye. A dense array of black gold sword feathers appeared behind Sumo, each one hovering in midair with its tip pointing outward. Sumo looked toward a rock wall 50 meters away. He moved his mind. Swish, 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 swish. Countless sharp sounds of breaking through the air suddenly rang out. The sword feathers hovering behind Sumo instantly turned into streaks of black gold light shooting toward the rock wall. The flying speed of the sword feathers was as fast as lightning. In an instant, a dense sound came from the rock wall. Dust and rock fragments flew everywhere. When the dust settled, the surface of the rock wall was seen to be densely covered with black gold sword feathers. Some were deeply embedded in the rock wall, with only half of the feather tail visible, while others were completely embedded. The entire rock wall now looked like a giant hedgehog, covered all over with black sword feathers. Sumo moved his mind. The sword feathers embedded in the giant rock trembled slightly, and then, as if summoned, pulled themselves out of the rock wall, traced arcs in the air, and flew back behind Sumo. They rearranged themselves in the air, combining together seamlessly one by one, and in the blink of an eye they reformed that pair of black gold sword wings. With a shhh sound, the entire pair of wings instantly retracted into his body. At this moment, the skin on his back was as smooth as before. If not for the two holes in his clothes, one would never have known that something had just broken out from there. Grandpa Gold Crocodile, these are the two attack methods of the black gold sword wings. If I use the disintegration attack, I cannot maintain the flight ability, but the stat boost still remains. Gold Crocodile Douluo exclaimed. An external spirit bone is truly a treasure of heaven and earth. Xiaomo, this opportunity of yours is truly remarkable. Sumo smiled. This is all thanks to Grandpa Gold Crocodile helping me hunt the spirit beast. Gold Crocodile Douluo heard this and waved his hand. An external spirit bone is something that depends entirely on your own fortune. He paused, a hint of curiosity flashing in his eyes. By the way, what is your third spirit ability? After absorbing the third spirit ring, my spirit power broke through to level 32. As for my third spirit ability, it is a group attack and control skill. I call it Shura Sword Prison. After releasing it, it can form a massive ceiling sword formation. Within the sword formation, countless sword chi will continuously attack the enemy from all directions without end, and on the outer perimeter of the sword formation, a sword chi barrier will form. Once formed, it is very difficult for spirit masters of the same rank to break through. If I encounter an opponent whose strength far exceeds mine, this sword formation can also buy me time to escape. Gold Crocodile Douluo listened, nodded. Not bad, let's go, it's time for us to return. Two figures headed toward the outer perimeter. Chapter 18 Fallen Spirit Masters. A horrifying scene. Dusk descended. On the road back to Spirit City from the Stardew Great Forest, a luxurious carriage was traveling. The driver was none other than Gold Crocodile Douluo. At this moment he had completely concealed his aura, appearing just like an ordinary old man. They had already traveled 40 to 50 li away from the Stardew Great Forest, with more than half the journey to Spirit City remaining. They planned to rush back through the night. Suddenly Gold Crocodile Douluo frowned, his arm tensed and he pulled on the reins. The horse whinnied, its front hooves rearing high before crashing back down as it came to a stop. The carriage curtain was lifted and Sumo leaned out. Gold Crocodile Grandfather, why? Before he could finish, a gentle breeze swept by. Sumo's nose twitched slightly and his brows instantly knitted together. The wind carried a thick, pungent smell of blood. A village to the southeast. A group of fallen spirit masters are causing trouble, Gold Crocodile Douluo said, releasing his mental force to investigate. There are 4 of them, their strength around the spirit ancestor level. Both Spirit City and the Stardew Great Forest are located between the 2 great empires of Heaven Dew and Star Luo. Their return journey inevitably passed through the border region, and border regions are always the most chaotic places. Although the Spirit Hall intervened to prevent large-scale wars, border friction between the 2 empires had never ceased. Such chaotic areas often saw fallen spirit masters committing crimes. Gold Crocodile Grandfather, Sumo said gravely. One of the Spirit Hall's duties is to combat fallen spirit masters. We cannot stand by and do nothing. Crocodile Douluo gave a slight nod. Naturally, a fighting spirit filled Sumo's eyes. For this battle, let me handle it alone. I want to test my current strength. If there's no life-threatening danger, please refrain from intervening. Gold Crocodile Grandfather. Good. Gold Crocodile Douluo nodded calmly. They were merely a few spirit ancestors. If he, with his protection, allowed anything to happen to Sumo, then his over 100 years of life would have been in vain. Gold Crocodile Douluo stamped his foot and his figure soared into the air. Sumo's black gold sword wings suddenly unfurled from his back. With a single beat he followed closely behind Gold Crocodile Douluo. Enveloped by Gold Crocodile Douluo's mental force, the auras of the 2 were completely isolated as if they had merged with the night itself. A moment later, they landed in a shrub outside the village. Sumo narrowed his eyes and looked ahead. In the next instant, his pupils contracted sharply. Ahead was a small village with a dozen or so earthen houses. But now most of the houses had collapsed, wisps of white smoke rising from the broken walls and ruins. The night wind swept by, carrying a heavy scent of blood and char. In the central clearing of the village, a bonfire burned brightly, illuminating the entire open space. Around it lay dozens of corpses, men and women, old and young. Most had skin tightly clinging to their bones, sunken eye sockets and slightly parted mouths, resembling mummies dried for hundreds of years. Under an old locust tree at the edge of the clearing, 3 young women huddled together. They trembled as they curled up, biting their lips tightly, not daring to make a sound. The innermost woman held a 2- or 3-year-old child in her arms, her hand firmly covering the child's mouth. The child's eyes were wide open, sobbing and whimpering. Beside the bonfire were 4 fallen spirit masters, 3 men and 1 woman. One was a bald, stout man, behind whom floated the phantom of a blood-red bat. He sat cross-legged, a faint blood-red light swirling around him. Before him lay the body of a villager who had just lost his life. Clearly, he was absorbing life force to cultivate. Next to the bald man was a woman of average appearance. Several black patterns adorned her neck. Her spirit was a black vine, currently binding a villager, also absorbing life force to cultivate. Not far away, a short, fat man held a ceramic jar, tilting his head back and gulping down its contents. A blood-red liquid trickled from the corner of his mouth, dripping onto his lapels. He paid no mind, merely gulping it down, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down. After drinking, he wiped his mouth, stuck out his tongue to lick the remaining blood from his lips, let out a long, satisfied sigh, his face full of intoxication as if savoring the most delicious food in the world. Just then a tall, thin man beside Fatty stood up. His complexion was deathly pale, his eye sockets sunken, with dark circles beneath his eyes, looking like someone who had indulged excessively. He twisted his neck, his gaze turning toward the women under the old locust tree, a lecherous smile curling at the corner of his mouth. He took a step toward them. No, don't come any closer. One of the women, seeing his approaching figure, trembled violently, desperately shrinking back. But her back was already against the rough tree trunk. There was nowhere left to retreat. The tall, thin man grinned, revealing a mouthful of uneven, yellow teeth. Little beauty, don't be afraid. He licked his chapped lips, his voice hoarse. If you want to live, serve me well. If you please me, maybe I'll let you live a few more days. He reached out, grabbing for the woman's lapels. Just as his fingertips were about to touch the fabric, a sharp whistling sound suddenly tore through the night sky. The tall, thin man jerked his hand back and quickly turned around. His pupils instantly contracted. He saw countless streams of black and gold light, like a torrential downpour, shooting toward him. The lecherous expression on his face vanished instantly, replaced by terror. In haste he released his spirit, a bone blade. It wasn't the normal white of bone, but a white tinged with red, as if soaked in countless amounts of blood, giving off a sinister dark red hue. 3 spirit rings rose from his feet, white, yellow, yellow. His spirit power fluctuation was at the 39th rank. The tall, thin man wanted to unleash a spirit ability to block. However, his movements were still too slow. His 3rd spirit ring had just begun to glow. The black and gold streams of light suddenly converged midair, forming a shape like an all-asterisk shoe. Asterisk, the black and gold all instantly pierced through his chest. The tremendous impact sent his body flying backward. With a asterisk thud asterisk, it slammed hard into the distant ruins. He fell to the ground, lying face down in a pool of blood, eyes wide open, already lifeless. In his chest was a blood hole the size of a bowl, clear through from front to back. Blood gushed from the wound, rapidly spreading beneath him. Ah, the women under the old locust tree were splattered with blood and let out screams. At that moment the black and gold all did not stop. Instead it arced through the air, suddenly disintegrating into 3 streams of light, each shooting toward the 3 people by the bonfire. However, the sudden death of the tall, thin man had already put them on high alert. Now the 3 had already released their spirits, their spirit rings flickering around them. Both the bald, stout man and Fatty's spirit rings were of the optimal configuration. The bald, stout man's spirit power fluctuation was at the 45th rank, Fatty's was at the 44th rank. The woman's spirit rings were white, yellow, purple, with spirit power at the 41st rank. The bald, stout man took a step sideways, positioning himself in front of the female spirit master, as her spirit was a plant-type control system spirit master with weaker defense. Just as the black streams of light were about to strike, the 3rd spirit ring beneath the bald, stout man's feet suddenly lit up. The blood-red bat violently spread its wings and folded them forward. Instantly, a blood-red barrier condensed around his body. Chapter 19. Instant kill. The enraged bald, stout man boom. The black gold sword wings slammed into the blood-red shield, stirring up ripples of crimson, yet they could not advance an inch. At the same time, the black gold sword wings on the other side were also blocked. The short, fat man's spirit was the ceramic jar he had been holding earlier. It was dark red all over, and now it had expanded several times in size, its body blocking the black gold sword wings. In the distance, Sumo frowned slightly. Relying on the newly acquired black gold sword wings, it was indeed still difficult to break through the defense of a high-level spirit ancestor. With a shift of his will, countless sword feathers traced arcs in the air, flying back behind him to reassemble into the black gold sword wings. With a flap of his wings, his figure rose from the ground, arriving above the 3 of them in an instant, looking down at them from high above. Just a little brat. The bald, stout man exclaimed in surprise when he saw who it was. He had assumed that the Spirit Hall enforcement team had discovered them and was wondering how to escape. It turned out to be just a greenhorn. He hurriedly sensed his surroundings but found no one else, only the boy in front of him who looked no older than 10. Boss, the female fallen spirit master cried out in alarm, pointing at Sumo's back. Look at those wings on his back, they don't seem to be condensed from spirit power. Could it be the legendary external spirit bone? What? The bald, stout man's pupils contracted sharply as he stared at the black gold sword wings on Sumo's back. The next instant greed welled up in his eyes. Haha, it must be. Big brother, Fatty walked over and licked his lips. This kid actually has such a treasure. He's truly a fat sheep delivered to our doorstep. Besides, the blood of a spirit master is much more delicious than that of these lowly commoners. And he's such a young one with tender skin and flesh, just thinking about it makes it delicious. I really want to taste it right now, kid, the bald, stout man sneered. Be a good boy and come down to die and I might leave your corpse intact. At this moment he didn't take Sumo seriously at all. He was just a kid who relied on a spirit bone to sneak attack and kill the weakest among them. At such an age, how strong could he be in a direct confrontation? Crushing him wouldn't be any harder than crushing an ant. Are you finished? Sumo hovered in midair, his voice terrifyingly calm. His gaze swept over the corpses strewn across the ground and then glanced at the survivors. A cold, murderous intent rose from the depths of his eyes. You damned fallen spirit masters, you've killed so many innocent villagers. Die! He made a grasping motion with his right hand and the Asura Demon Sword materialized in his palm. At the same time, 1 yellow and 2 purple spirit rings suddenly appeared beneath his feet, shining exceptionally brightly in the night sky. A 1,000-year second spirit ring, spirit elder. How is that possible? How old is he? The bald, stout man exclaimed in shock. Fatty and the female fallen spirit master's expressions also changed drastically at the same time. To have a 1,000-year second spirit ring and be a spirit elder at such an age, this was definitely not something an ordinary spirit master could achieve. That kid's background must be significant. He was likely from some major power. But they had no time to think further because Sumo had already made his move. The first and second spirit rings beneath his feet flashed in succession. His attack, speed, strength and defense instantly doubled, coupled with the all-attribute boost from the black gold sword wings. At this moment, although Sumo's spirit power level was only 32, his overall strength was already enough to rival a spirit ancestor. Although there was still a gap compared to the 2 high-level spirit ancestors before him, his Asura Demon Sword spirit had a certain suppressive effect on their spirits, so it wasn't as if he didn't have the power to fight. Sumo's black gold sword wings flapped violently and he dove downwards, courting death. The bald, stout man roared and the second spirit ring beneath his feet lit up instantly. Second spirit skill, blood wings. A pair of huge blood-colored bat wings condensed behind him and with a violent flap he charged towards Sumo. However, Sumo had no intention of tangling with him at all. His goal was very clear: kill the female fallen spirit master first. Just as the two were about to collide head-on, the black gold sword wings behind Sumo tilted sharply. Rushing past the bald, stout man and diving straight for the female fallen spirit master on the ground. The bald, stout man missed his attack, his expression changing drastically, and he hurriedly turned back to pursue. Fatty's ceramic jar also flew out of his hand, spinning rapidly in the air as it smashed toward Sumo's for the female fallen spirit master. Seeing Sumo coming straight for her, her face turned instantly pale. But she was a spirit ancestor after all. At this life-and-death moment she gritted her teeth, her third spirit ring flashed and she frantically mobilized her spirit power. Countless black vines burst from the ground in front of her, each as thick as a baby's arm like living snakes swarming toward Sumo to entangle him. However, Sumo had no intention of dodging or slowing down, he didn't even swing his sword to cut them. His figure spun violently and he himself became like a spinning top, crashing straight into that sea of vines. Kai 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 kai. The moment those black vines touched the black gold sword wings, they shattered into pieces, black sap splattered everywhere and the severed vines landed on the ground, still wriggling slightly. What? Save me. The female fallen spirit master's pupils contracted, and she screamed in terror, still continuously mobilizing her vines. Trying to stop Sumo, her method of attack relied solely on using vines to entangle enemies and then draining their life force. Once her vines were broken, she was a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. However, no matter how many vines there were, they were useless in front of Sumo's black gold sword wings. In an instant, Sumo arrived in front of the female fallen spirit master. A flash of sword light passed, the female fallen spirit master only felt a chill at her neck. She wanted to speak, to scream, to beg for mercy, but she couldn't make a sound because her throat had been completely cut open. She widened her eyes, her mouth opening and closing, her hands clutching her neck. The next second her head slid from her neck, hitting the ground with a thud, rolling twice, her wide eyes filled with endless terror and unwillingness. The headless corpse also fell straight forward, slamming into the ground with a bang. At this moment, Sumo had already opened up the distance again, flying back into midair, dodging the pincer attack from the bald, stout man and Fatty. He hovered in the night, the black gold sword wings flapping slowly behind him. He knew that the real tough battle was yet to come. The remaining two had spirit power levels far higher than his. One was level 45 and one was level 44, and he was only level 32, maintaining the boost required constant consumption of spirit power. A prolonged battle was very disadvantageous for him, so he had to end it quickly. The bald stout man looked at the headless female corpse on the ground, and a surge of rage immediately welled up in his heart. It wasn't because he cared about the female fallen spirit master. They were fallen spirit masters and never spoke of feelings. They gathered together only to resist the Spirit Hall enforcement team. After all, one more person meant one more source of strength. What he was truly enraged about was that a brat under 10 years old had killed two of his people right in front of him. A spirit ancestor, this was simply not taking him seriously at all. Fourth spirit skill, Blood Bat Shattering Void Chant, Chapter 20. Sonic Attack, Sumo's sword path. The bald stout man roared and the fourth spirit ring at his feet suddenly lit up. The phantom of the blood-colored bat suddenly expanded several times over, opening its gaping maw to roar in Sumo's direction. Buzz. A tidal wave of sonic energy erupted from the blood-colored bat's mouth. Wherever the sonic wave passed, the air distorted violently. Sumo's expression changed abruptly. He could not dodge this attack now. The sonic wave was not only fast, but its coverage was extremely wide. He only had enough time to abruptly retract his black gold sword wings to protect his front. Boom! An invisible, immense force slammed fiercely into Sumo. He only felt his internal energy churning violently. A sweet taste rose in his throat and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body, like a kite with a broken string, flew backward from midair and smashed heavily into the ruins dozens of meters away. Cough, cough. Sumo slowly propped up his body and raised a hand to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. If not for the dual defense of the external spirit bone and the Asura blood armor, this blow would have been enough to severely injure him. He gritted his teeth, and the black gold sword wings behind him flapped violently, lifting him from the ruins and sending him back into midair. At this moment he looked incredibly disheveled, his clothes torn, his hair messy with blood still hanging from the corner of his mouth. The bald, stout man not far away frowned deeply. A spirit elder had taken his fourth spirit ability and only sustained minor injuries. Fatty, this kid is strange. Don't hold back, let's attack together and finish this quickly, the bald, stout man said in a deep voice. All right, big brother. Fatty responded and moved, the first spirit ring at his feet lighting up. He saw that near the corpses of the thin, tall man and the female spirit ancestor, the yet to coagulate blood seemed to be drawn by a force, turning into two streams of blood that floated toward the ceramic jar in his hand. Fatty's first spirit ability was called Blood Attraction. It could absorb the blood around him, and after drinking it he could amplify his own strength. The stronger the blood, the greater the amplification. Although Sumo did not know the specific effects of this spirit ability, he would never stand there foolishly waiting for the enemy to finish preparing, especially for a spirit ability that clearly required time. Interrupting the casting directly was the best choice. Third spirit ability, Asura Sword Prison. Sumo channeled his spirit power, and the third spirit ring at his feet lit up. He saw several streams of blood-red light converge in the air, instantly condensing into dozens of small blood-colored swords that whistled toward Fatty. The small swords instantly stabbed into the ground around Fatty, trapping him in the center, and a blood-red sword formation formed instantly. Countless blood-red sword auras slashed toward Fatty from all directions. Fatty was forced to interrupt his blood absorption. He could only hastily drink the portion of blood he had already absorbed. Even so, the effects of the two spirit masters' blood were far superior to that of ordinary villagers, and his aura instantly surged. However, facing the dense sword auras, he simply could not defend against them all. The sword auras carved wounds into his body. Although they were not deep, he discovered with horror that a strange, erosive sensation was coming from the wounds, causing his spirit power circulation to become sluggish. He dared not delay any longer and used all his strength to drive the ceramic jar, smashing it fiercely against the sword formation barrier. Boom! The sword formation barrier rippled, but it did not suffer the slightest damage. A cage formed by a 5000-year spirit ability was indeed not so easy to break through for a spirit ancestor. Fatty gritted his teeth and smashed it again and again. Outside the sword formation, the blood-bat bald stout man was already locked in battle with Sumo spirit power collided, sword auras crisscrossed. After dozens of rounds, crack, the sword formation below suddenly shattered. The dark red ceramic jar flew out from the sword formation, heading straight to smash into Sumo's back. Sumo sensed the crisis behind him and wanted to dodge. However, it was at this moment of vulnerability that the bald stout man released his fourth spirit ability again. The tidal wave of sonic energy erupted, blasting Sumo away and causing him to slam fiercely into the ceramic jar behind him. Sumo spat out another mouthful of blood and fell straight to the ground. Several sword feathers of his black-gold sword wings were even knocked off, scattering around him. He struggled to prop up his body, leaning the Asura Demon Sword on the ground, clutching his painfully throbbing chest. His spirit power was already far inferior to that of the two opponents, and he had been maintaining amplification spirit abilities to hold his own against high-level spirit ancestors. Coupled with the high age of his spirit abilities, releasing them required consuming a large amount of spirit power. By this point in the battle, he had less than 20% of his spirit power left. This battle made him see his own strength clearly. Ordinary low-level spirit ancestors were no match for him. Against a high-level spirit ancestor, if it were one-on-one, he was confident he could fight. But both of the people opposite him were high-level spirit ancestors, and they were attacking him together. Although he had honed his combat skills for a year and defeated many opponents, but those were just training, not life-and-death battles. Facing two spirit ancestors joining forces was still somewhat strenuous. At this moment, the bald stout man landed not far in front of him, a ferocious smile on his face. "Kid, a spirit elder like you daring to come and cause us trouble, you really are a newborn calf that isn't afraid of tigers." Fatty held the dark red ceramic jar in his hand, the surface of the jar stained with a little of Sumo's blood. He stuck out his tongue, licked the residual bloodstains, narrowed his eyes, and a look of intoxication appeared on his face. "What delicious blood, haha, if I refine your blood I will definitely be able to level up several times in a row." Sumo watched the two people approaching step by step. Was he going to be defeated just like this? Wait for Grandpa Golden Crocodile to make a move. He was somewhat unwilling. His gaze swept over the dried corpses littering the ground, and the woman and children under the old locust tree opposite. They were staring straight at this side at this moment. Pair after pair of eyes met his gaze in the air. There was fear, despair, and also hope. However, those two fallen spirit masters. At this moment they were laughing, their laughter echoing in the night sky. As if murder, arson, slaughtering the entire village, and using living people for cultivation were just mundane, trivial matters. Their laughter was grating, ferocious, and disgusting. Sumo's hand holding the sword trembled slightly. An unprecedented rage rose from the deepest part of his heart. He suddenly lowered his head and slowly closed his eyes. He once thought that his sword path was just slaughter, killing all enemies. But now he suddenly understood. His spirit was the Asura Demon Sword, and his sword path was not just pure slaughter, but also the judgment of sin and the adjudication of demons. Buzz, the Asura Demon Sword in Sumo's hand vibrated gently, and he felt a resonance coming from the depths of his soul. The demonic patterns on the sword also began to light up slowly. At first it was only a faint light, but very quickly that light grew brighter and brighter, more and more intense. With a crack, the ground split into several fine cracks, spreading in all directions with the tip of the sword as the center. The surrounding gravel, without wind, moved on its own and slowly floated up. A faint blood-red mist began to spread from around Sumo's body. "What is happening?" The bald stout man and Fatty stopped abruptly and looked around vigilantly. They felt an icy chill, as if they had fallen into an ice cellar.